Hey guys, welcome back to another What's for Dinner video. I've got 3 really delicious recipes to share with you in today's video. I've got a couple that are pretty quick as far as the prep goes, and then another one that's a little bit more in depth, but all 3 are really delicious, so let's get right into it. This first dinner is one that I have made many times and I've shared with you many times. I will have the original recipe linked down in the description box below, but we're making some beef ramen stir fry. And I started by heating up some oil, either avocado oil or olive oil. And I'm going to cook some broccoli and carrots that I've cut up. Sometimes most of the time actually, I've used frozen broccoli, but I had fresh on hand this time. And we're just going to cook them until it is tender. Move that to another dish and then more oil in the pan if needed. My beef is pretty lean, so I did need to add some more oil. And we're going to cook up 1 pound of ground beef. Now you can also chop up an onion and put that in here. But I guess I didn't feel like it this night, so I'm just going to put in some dried minced onion. Put in a good amount, probably, I don't know, 1 to 2 tablespoons. And we're just going to go cook that until our meat is fully cooked. While that is happening, we are going to make the sauce for this. Now, I usually double or triple this sauce, so I will once again have the original recipe linked down below, but you are going to take some coconut aminos or soy sauce, some brown sugar, and I'm using some red wine vinegar. I think the recipe calls for apple cider vinegar, and usually I just do nothing, but I decided to just put in a tiny bit of red wine vinegar and then some minced garlic, and that is our really delicious sauce. Oh yeah, and sriracha. I'm putting in a few not a few tablespoons, that's a little too much. A few teaspoons, and we're going to mix that all together. And then I also boiled up some water and cooked some ramen noodles. Another change that I usually do is I use a lot more of the noodles than the recipe calls for because we always just felt like there wasn't enough noodles. So do that how you want. And I'm just mixing everything in the pot because my pan is not big enough. So once the noodles are cooked and drained, we're going to add in our vegetables, our meat, and our sauce and give everything a good toss. And that's all there is for this recipe. My husband usually likes to add water chestnuts on top of his, but we unfortunately were out. So I think he might have put some cashews on his or something. But this is so good, really delicious. Highly, highly recommend this recipe. All right, so for tonight's dinner, we are hopefully having soup. The power just started flashing, going on and off. So I don't know. We shall see. But we're gonna do like a potato veggie creamy soup. I did not have a full menu plan this week, and I was just made something up based on what I had in the pantry and in the fridge that needed to be used. And I will do my best to leave the recipe down below. It's kind of like a conglomeration of multiple recipes that I've mixed together, and I do it a little bit different each time, but I will take you along. I have 1 onion sauteing right now in some olive oil in my pot. You could just dump the onions in with the other veggies later that you'll see, but I just like mine. I prefer my onions if they've been sauteed. And I'm going to be adding lots of veggies, but you could easily just do like potatoes or potatoes and broccoli. But I'm also going to do carrots and corn, and then we've got the onions, and we're going to add in garlic too. So we're going to just saute this until they are nice and tender. All right, these have been cooking for a few minutes. I'm just going to put in a nice scoop of garlic cloves, minced garlic. Rather, I guess is the right way to say it. I did not mince it myself. I'm going to let that go for just about 30 seconds, and we're going to dump in 4 cups of chicken broth. And then I have my potatoes here. I've got 3 large carrots, and then I have, I don't know, about 3 cups of potatoes, and then I have a couple that I just have like big chunks. I cut 2 potatoes like this size in half, and we're going to put those in here as well. I'm actually going to dump the veggies first. That way I don't get splattered. And I'm going to hold off on the broccoli just a little bit because I don't think it's going to take as long to cook. And the corn will be just fine at the end as well. I might have to get a little, well, let's see. So I might have to get a little more. But I think that's, as long as everything's under. Yep, I'm going to let that come to a boil and to simmer for, a little while. Probably I'll let it simmer for about 5 minutes, and then I'll add in the broccoli. There's a couple little pieces of broccoli in there now, but And then I will add in the broccoli. I'm also gonna add a little bit of salt, about a teaspoon of salt. And you could add pepper too if you wanna add some black pepper. I just don't generally cook with black pepper. All right, so I'm gonna add my broccoli. I have probably another 4 cups. So there's a lot of veggies. It's gonna be like 8 cups of veggies plus a can of corn. So I'm gonna add in some more broth. You can adjust that based on your preference, but we like this to be started out as a potato soup, but it usually turns into like a creamy vegetable soup. So I'm gonna add this in. This broccoli, I have 1 bag of frozen broccoli, and then I had a little bit of fresh still in my refrigerator, so I did that. So yeah, we're gonna add in probably 2 more cups of broth. All right, so I'm not gonna do any more than that, otherwise this pot's gonna get really full. We will be adding in some, we're gonna use some milk to make like a cheese mixture that we'll be adding in, so there's gonna be more liquid. When I make these soups, they end up kind of getting out of control. I end up making a huge batch because I just keep adding more things. So we're going to let this continue to simmer. It's got to come back up to a simmer now, but until all of the veggies are tender. And once those big pieces are right here are tender, we'll pull them out and mash them, and then put them back in here, and that's going to act as a thickener to the soup. I did leave the skin on my potatoes, but you can easily peel your potatoes if you want. But I used yellow potatoes, and their skin is super, super tender. So I'm going to add in some of this ham. I get this from Aldi. I'll probably do about half of it, and then I'm going to wrap the other half up and freeze it. And then I'm going to use some of these real bacon pieces. Sometimes I use like fresh bacon. I just kind of alternate what I do based on what I have on hand. I'm going to chop this up into little pieces and get that ready to add in. I'm going to add that towards the end because otherwise I feel like the ham loses all of its flavor. Probably because the ham flavor gets into the soup, which is good. But it just absorbs everything else. So I'm gonna put this in at the end. All right, I switched my burners around, moved the soup over here. I've got 5 tablespoons of butter melting here, and I'm supposed to add 5 tablespoons of flour, but I don't have it. So I'm adding what I do have, which is probably like 2 to 3. We're gonna whisk this together. I'm gonna add, I think, some cream cheese to the soup to maybe help thicken it up a little bit more since I didn't have enough flour. Not that cream cheese is a substitute for flour, but it will make the soup a little bit thicker and creamier. So you would normally do equal amounts. I could have done less butter, I thought about it, but I didn't. And then we are going to slowly add in 2.5 cups of milk. You might see some green floaties in the milk. Don't be alarmed. It's just broccoli because I keep using the same measuring cup for everything. And we're gonna whisk this together, just continuing to add a little bit at a time and get that all warmed up. All right, I'm gonna begin adding some cheese. I shredded up 1 block of white cheddar cheese, and I'm just going to mix it in and let some of it melt and then add in the rest, and we'll do that till it's all in there. And we got a nice cheesy sauce. All right, so the shredded cheese is pretty well incorporated. I'm now adding in about 3 to 4 ounces of cream cheese that I did cut up into cubes, and we're going to incorporate this in here as well. You don't need to do this if you have the right amount of butter and flour ratio, but I do sometimes put cream cheese or sour cream in these soups anyway, just because it does make it nice and creamy. So you can use that or omit that. I mean, as is most of the things in the recipe, but this is what I am doing. I added in probably about 2 cups of that chopped up ham, and I already pulled out the potato halves. We'll get to those in just a second. Now I'm going to add in 1 can of drained corn, and then I'm gonna also add in maybe like half a bag of these little bacon pieces. Give that a nice stir. So we're just gonna mash up these potatoes. I'm just using a fork, and again, these skins are so tender that I'm not really worried about them. We're gonna add in just a splash of milk, maybe half a tablespoon or a tablespoon. Probably depends on how big your potatoes are. And then we're going to just add this back to the soup, and that kind of just helps thicken it up. I added that mashed up potato. Let me turn this vent off. And that cream cheese mixture, can see there's a couple little pieces of cream cheese in here, but I'm not really worried about it. They'll just finish dissolving. But we're about ready to serve this up. It looks good, it smells good. Topped with a little extra bacon, because who doesn't love bacon? And that is dinner for tonight. For tonight's dinner, we're gonna be making a brisket, and I wanted to find a recipe that didn't involve using the slow cooker. So I found a recipe on the website. I'll have the recipe link below, is Dinner Then Dessert. And I find myself using a lot of her recipes. But anyways, I've got 1 cup of water, and then we're gonna add in 3/4 cup of barbecue sauce, and then 1/4 cup of soy sauce, or I'm gonna use coconut aminos. It's a soy sauce substitute. I try to avoid soy, so that's why I do that. I'm gonna try to get the very last bit of this barbecue sauce, just because I don't want to waste any of it. All right, so I just used a 2-cup measuring cup, so I don't have a lot of room to mix, but I'm gonna just mix this up. I said to mix it in a large bowl, but I'm like, why dirty each measuring cup when I can just do it like this? I've got my brisket. The recipe calls for 4 pounds of brisket. I have no idea what size this is, because we bought our meat in bulk from like a local farmer. So they're individually packaged, but they're not labeled as far as like weight goes. But anyways, I'm going to pour this mixture over the brisket. All right, I'm going to admit, this looks a little scary to me, because I know there's gonna be liquid that comes from the meat. So I'm actually gonna get a baking sheet to put this on in the oven. All right, so we're doing that just as a safety measure, because I don't know, I'm hoping it doesn't bubble over, but we want to tightly cover this baking dish with aluminum foil. And that's it. I'm gonna put this in the oven at 300 degrees for 4 hours. And I need to figure out what we're eating with this tonight. I don't know yet, but you'll see in just a second. So to go with tonight's dinner, we're gonna make some creamy corn, which I'm gonna share with you. And then I'm also making up just some boxed mac and cheese. That just sounded really good to me. And I'm also gonna steam up some green beans in just a second as well. I put in this pot here 2 cans of corn that have been drained. Now the recipe calls for 24, I think, ounces of frozen corn. So this is actually gonna be 30 ounces of corn, but I'm sure it's gonna be just fine. And the reason I think it's gonna be just fine is because I kind of felt like this was a lot of cream cheese and butter. Now we're gonna have leftovers. It's not like we're gonna be eating all of this tonight, but that seemed like a lot, but I'm gonna go with it. So I've got 1/4 cup or 1/2 stick of a butter that's been cubed up, and 8 ounces of cream cheese that's also been cubed up. It's not quite room temperature, but it has been sitting out for a little while. I also had this plate kind of sitting out on top of the stove top, just because it's a little bit warm because the oven has been on. And then I have 2 tablespoons of sugar and a teaspoon of salt that I'm gonna add in. You could also add in 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper if you like that. And I'm gonna heat this up on about medium heat and get this really well combined. And then we're going to let it cook at that temperature for about 10 minutes, just making sure that you keep stirring it. And, oh goodness, and try not to make a complete mess. And then we will lower it to the temperature to low and let it go for another 5 minutes, stirring, you know, a couple times in between there. Here it is all plated up. Dinner for tonight. We got the barbecue brisket, creamy corn, some mac and cheese, and some steamed green beans. Okay, well that's gonna do it for today's video. If you liked it, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Subscribe if you are new so you don't miss out on my future videos. And make sure that notification bell is turned on. And I will see you next time. Bye guys.